Good morning. My name is Frank Peters. I'm a past New York State Commander of the American Legion, a past County Commander of the American Legion in Richmond County, and a retired ferryboat captain. We've been doing the Pearl Harbor Day ceremony here at the Staten Island Ferry for some 23 years, but this year is kind of special. It's the 75th anniversary of that attack on Pearl Harbor. Nothing special about that. That was really a tragedy, what happened on that day. And we come together today to memorialize the event in that many men, women, and children were lost their lives that day. And I couldn't be more pleased to be standing here today with two World War II veterans, two proud World War II veterans, Ed Petrozola and Carlo Anderson. One of our group is missing today. Pete Morrow is not feeling well and couldn't be with us, and Jim Smith is recuperating at the Vanderbilt nursing home, and we certainly want to extend our best wishes to them for speedy return to health. We were talking last year about, is there anything really special about the 75th anniversary? It certainly is a milestone, but it's every year when we get to remember this event, we remember the tragedy, and it is kind of sad that we have to come together every year to do this. But it's very important that we do, because of the great sacrifices of the men and women of the greatest generation. First of all, the attack on Pearl Harbor, and then your service to this country in the 4 years that followed during that great war. So here we are again on the Staten Island Ferry, and we're doing our thing. Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, 1941. Here we are 75 years later.
Well, Frank, I was in the other part of the world when Pearl Harbor. My service was in the European theater.
Okay.
And I went through 5 campaigns over there and can home a whole person. So for that I thank God. So.
Thank God.
But I was talking to Carlo on the way over here on the train, and he says he remembers what he was doing on that day. Strangely enough, he was doing the same thing I was doing, playing football.
Oh, okay.
So, nevertheless, we would not miss this occasion if we possibly can every year. So.
Yeah, a solemn event, but all the same a very important day to remember. Carlo, I know we were talking earlier, and you were telling me, as Ed said, that you were playing football on that day. And tell us what happened.
Actually, I was playing football the day before, and I got injured, and I was in the hospital overnight. And on December 7th, 1941, my father, it was depression. My father didn't own a car. He found a neighbor who had a car, and they came to get me to take me home. And they got me dressed, and the orderly said to my father and the other gentleman, "I'll be right back. I have to get some paperwork." He came back to where we were, and he said to my father and the other gentleman, "The Japanese just bombed Pearl Harbor." And my dad and the other guy said, "What's Pearl Harbor?" And I was 16 then. That was in July 16, 1943, right after I got out of high school. I was still 17. I went to boot camp in the United States Coast Guard and wound up doing convoy duty between the East Coast and the Mediterranean.
Yeah, today we also remember Staten Island had 2 Pearl Harbor survivors right here, veterans from Staten Island, Alf Kongsley and John DeChico. They're no longer with us, but we certainly pay tribute to them. And your service, even though you weren't in Pearl Harbor that morning, your service to this country in the years that followed was definitely extraordinary and worthwhile.
Interesting, Frank. You talk about people being thankful. I went back to Europe with my son in 2005. And I had my Legion hat on, and everybody that recognized me as an American vet in France and in Belgium always said, "We thank you for our freedom." This was 60 years later, and they're thanking us for our freedom. In the trip that we took from Normandy to Central Europe, where I ended up, every town had action of some kind, and there was a monument.
Yes.
You would never know it was there, but nevertheless, they would tell you the 75th Division, that activity here and everything. But it was so encouraging, and really to hear these people after 60 years thanking me for their freedom.
Today is certainly a day of remembrance and a day of thanks for the greatest generation of American veterans that served during World War II, and especially at the time that we commemorate today and remember Pearl Harbor. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Here we go, Frank.
A longtime friend of ours, Mr. Frank Peters from the Richmond County American Legion, joins us. It's great to see you up and about again, Frank. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you, Jamie.
We know that you had an accident recently. You went through a little bit of a scare. How are you feeling physically?
I'm improving. I'm doing my thing, seeing the doctor, going through my therapies and stuff, and then generally I feel I'm improving.
This has been a long time coming, 75 years since that fateful day took place. How did the idea of the celebration of the anniversary on the ferry begin?
I believe this is our 23rd year with the Staten Island Ferry, and they've had ceremonies all across the country, and of course it is a very important day. I think at the time we started, the World War II veterans started advancing in their age, and they were looking for just something convenient to remember this day that needs to be remembered, and in a proper and respectful way. And we presented the idea of maybe we should do it on the Staten Island Ferry, and what a great opportunity to lay a wreath in memory of the men, women, and children who lost their lives that day off the Statue of Liberty. It's a very unique ceremony, unique to Staten Island, unique to the Staten Island Ferry, and unique to the occasion itself. The actual event took place at 7:55 a.m. I believe it's 6:55 or 7:55 a.m. in Pearl Harbor. So later on today, at the exact time, they'll have a ceremony aboard the Intrepid in Manhattan, and also there'll be a ceremony at Curtis High School. They have a monument, a Pearl Harbor monument at Curtis, and they also have an ROTC there that does a great job. So we didn't want to interfere with those programs, but we wanted to have a program unique to the American Legion of Richmond County and Staten Island to pay respects to those men, women, and children who made the sacrifice on December 7th, 1941.
Is anything different going to be done for the 75th anniversary, or are you going to do the event the same way as the previous 22 times?
The ceremony will be the same. Usually we have an opening. We have the men and women with us today. We'll sing the national anthem. We'll go outside to the saloon deck. We'll toss the wreath off of the statue. We'll play taps. We'll come back inside. We'll hear the commander's message. We have a great artist with us today, Mr. Val Koltrinevich from Bugles Across America, who will play a military medley for us, and I think it's an outstanding program. It really doesn't need to change too much. I think it serves the purpose. It puts everybody in that reflective state of mind, and it brings honor and dignity to the day.
Now, you have an extensive military background of your own. How about telling the people about the time of service that you made, and also in what branch?
I'm a Navy veteran. I joined the U.S. Navy in 1981. I served during peacetime, and then war came upon us. People may remember in 1983 the Marine Corps barracks was bombed in Beirut, Lebanon, and we lost 241 servicemen that day. I think 223 Marines died that day. It was the largest single day for Marine Corps casualties since World War II. And so in that regard, we had just got through with our operation down at the island of Grenada, and we steamed across the Mediterranean, the Atlantic to the Mediterranean to right off the coast of Lebanon. We stayed there for 60 days, 60 consecutive days, in what was declared a combat zone. So I was an aviation electrician's mate. Second class, I worked on the electronic module test console, which basically I fixed the instrumentation for the aircraft, the A6s and the F-14 Tomcats, the SH-3s, and all the aircraft on board. So it was a great time for me reflecting back on my military service. I definitely appreciate all I've learned through my military service. In fact, years later, when I became a Staten Island ferryboat captain, I actually was working on September 11, 2003, and I left St. George at 8:30 in the morning on a normal trip, which became a not-so-normal trip once we hit mid-harbor and saw the first plane strike the World Trade Center. So I think that thinking back on that occasion, docking in Manhattan and hearing the second plane fly over and strike the second building, pulling out of Manhattan that day with so many people who ran back to the ferry to escape the tragedy, I really clearly remember thinking about Pearl Harbor and that we were under attack at that time. And I credit my military bearing for the way I was able to conduct myself and handle my crew that day.
75 years since that day took place in the island of Hawaii. After all these years, do you think that the young generation, specifically those in school, have a sense of how much impact that day still has on this country today?
Yeah, I think fortunately, as we saw earlier, we still have 2 World War II veterans with us today. Unfortunately, a lot of the World War II veterans, the people who tell the first-hand accounts, are not with us anymore, and we want to remember them. We want to remember Alf Kongsley and John DeChico, who were veterans from Staten Island who were at Pearl Harbor and survived that attack. They're no longer with us. I learned about Pearl Harbor in high school, and I'm pretty sure that at least in Staten Island, the children are getting a good education in world history, and I know they have a ceremony at Curtis High School. I don't know about what effect it has on them because it's history. We learn about the Revolutionary War, we learn about the Korean War, we learn about the Vietnam War, but it's up to the veterans today to really be the teachers and carry these remembrance ceremonies forward. And that's just like September 11th. After the attacks, after everything that happened that day and what happened in the days after that, it took me a very long time to talk about it. I couldn't talk about it. I just felt like my story wasn't as significant. But I realize now today that I have to tell that story because today's generation is growing up, and it's also an event that they hear about that they don't remember, or they weren't either born or they were either young when the event happened. So sometimes when I tell the story, they're hearing about it for the first time. And sometimes even today, probably sadly enough, that when we do events like this, people on the ferry boat will take notice, and it'll be the first time that they hear about Pearl Harbor. You don't think it's true, but we have such a diverse population, and people. We have a lot of new citizens that are just learning about this country, and it is a significant event, but it happened so long ago and it's so important that we continue to remember this day.
We see so many times ordinary citizens coming up to you and other veterans and shaking hands with you, telling you thanks for all of your service. How does that make you feel to this day?
It always makes you feel good, whenever somebody comes up and says thank you for your service, because I don't think you can look any veteran in the eye and call him a hero and see that he's comfortable with that, But I saw a community television program not so long ago when Judge Brennan was speaking at the Justice Court for Veterans, the Veterans Court, and he recalled what it means to be a citizen of the United States. One is that you vote, you exercise your right to vote. You have to do that to be a good citizen. You serve on a jury. You sit in judgment of your peers when called so to serve on a jury. And the highest honor for any citizen of the United States is to put on the uniform of the country. And I think we're all proud of that. We're very proud of that. And when people come up and say thank you for your service, it really means a lot. And I know we're getting close to the ferry and we'll probably have to wrap it up, but I also want to take this time to thank all the men and women who continue to serve today, our military personnel on active duty, wherever you're serving in this world. Thank you so much for your service from one veteran to another. Really appreciate your service.
And we certainly appreciate you for all you've done for our country. Frank, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The ceremony is almost ready to begin, so stick around.
On this day, 75 years ago, President Roosevelt declared it as a day which will live in infamy forever. We need to step outside because we are approaching the Statue of Liberty, and we will continue our service inside in a few moments. At this time, County Commander William Magnuski will place a wreath in the waters commemorating the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor 75 years ago today. Our services will continue inside. At this time, I would like to introduce the Richmond County Commander, William Magnuski, for his remarks. Commander Bill.
Thank you, Frank. 75 years later, most of the witnesses are no longer with us, but the legacy of the men and women who defended Pearl Harbor on the day of infamy will always remain. It was a day that defined America and changed the world. Service, sacrifice, and valor were demonstrated by American heroes at unprecedented levels, foreshadowed the trials, toughness, and grit that epitomized the greatest generation during the Second World War. Those who did not perish during the attacks were not just veterans of battle. They were survivors of an unprovoked and unexpected massive killing spree. Staten Island veterans who survived the Pearl Harbor attack, like Alf Kongsley and Don DeChico, are gone now. The more than 2,400 men, women, and children who died the day of the attack would be joined by thousands of others in the 7.5 decades since. As those able to provide first-hand accounts leave the ranks of the living, it is up to us to keep their legacies alive. And on behalf of Richmond County, the American Legion, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today for this memorial to those who gave their lives at Pearl Harbor. But we have to be ever vigilant and we have to be ever watchful because we don't need another sneak attack, as we've had two of them on our doorsteps, one at Pearl Harbor and then in 2001, September 11th, at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and in Pennsylvania. We have to remember that this country is only as good as its citizens are. And we ask that everyone, no matter where you are, if you do see something wrong, please say something to someone. We need the vigilance of this country. We need the vigilance of its citizens to make us a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander. Before I welcome back Mr. Val Katanowicz, I would like to introduce a few people that are here with us today. First and foremost, our World War II veterans. Would you please stand up and be recognized? Two members of our greatest generation. Gentlemen, it's an honor and a pleasure to be in your presence. Thank you. Also with us today we have from Kings County, past New York State Department Commander of the Sons of the American Legion, Joseph Santa Croce, and his wife. Joe, where your wife is? Marie? Oh, didn't know that. We have some members of the American Legion Auxiliary with us today. And will all the past district commanders and county commanders please stand up and be recognized? County commanders. County commanders? Any American Legion past presidents of the auxiliary? Okay. Marie? SAL commanders? Of course, Joe. And of course, we also are honored to have with us our past department commander of the American Legion State of New York, Frank Peters. Frank made a supreme effort to be here with us today because he is recovering from a very, very, very serious accident, and it's great to see you almost back in action, Frank. At this time, Mr. Val Katanowicz will play the Armed Forces Medley.
Navy first.
got them all? Thank you. Well done. Thank you. Before we close, I'd like to thank the New York City Department of Transportation, ferryboat Captain McClenahan, and the crew of the ferryboat John F. Kennedy. Also, I'd like to thank our co-chairs, Mark Kelly and Frank Peters, for putting this together for us today. Frank, where are you? Oh, there he is. Thanks again. And now, if you would please join me and pass Department Vice Commander Harry Crone in singing God Bless America. Harry?
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you, Harry. With the colors of our glorious nation in place, hand salute. Ready? 2. Thank you. That concludes our program. Jamie Hickson, thank you so much for taking charge today.